layered game, each word a thread of revelation, woven deep in veiled elation. Welcome to the Sitara Podcast. The torch is lit, let's begin. Sitara, Sitara. Sitara, Sitara.
Have you ever wondered if ultimate truth lies in the balance of opposites? Or perhaps the key to enlightenment is in the embracing of contradictions? Welcome to Sitara Podcast. This is a podcast where we discuss everything to do with philosophy, Freemasonry, and theology. To my left is the Monarch to Sitara, Grotto, Mr. Avinash. Mr. Avinash, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. It's always a pleasure when brethren get together and dwell in unity.
Love it. I love it. Yes, it is. And that is the perfect way to invoke any kind of brotherhood or fraternal emotion to any meeting. Behind the cameras, we have Prophet Giancarlo Sanchez helping us up with production. Today, we will be discussing whether ultimate enlightenment lies in the balance of opposites or in the embracing of these contradictions. To begin off, what do you have to say about this, Mr. Monarch?
With the balance of opposites, you're dealing with good and bad. Or, it may not be good or bad. It may be the inclination to do good and the inclination to do wrong or bad, however you want to put it. Because your bad may be good to me and my bad may be good to you. Opposites, we have to have them in life. Without opposites, we'd be robots.
Right. Well, I believe it, of course, lies in the nature of the reality of the realm we're in, right? Physicality entraps us in a dualistic reality.
Right.
So by the nature of where we're at, anytime anything arises, whether it's a thought or a thing, its opposite will naturally arise.
Correct.
So do we embrace that contradiction or must we choose a side?
It's more of a personal preference. And the reason I say it's a personal preference because what may bring me joy may be the way that I live my life. But you may think that I'm living my life in the wrong, but it's good for me. So it ultimately nails down to that individual. Which one works for you, where you straddle the fence with one or two or have that goal that you're aiming for just one of them.
There is no doubt in my mind that it's all about having adaptability and flexibility. Oh, yeah. I have an interesting question for you. Is joy your compass?
My compass? Okay, so in the movie with Captain Jack Sparrow.
I know what you're talking about. Haven't seen the movie.
All right, so he's got the compass, and the compass is supposed to tell you what you want. His compass is scattered.
Uh-huh.
So that's how I am. My compass is a bunch of scribbles because it's so much in life that brings me, that centers my compass.
You gotta take me back. It's scribbles but centered at the same time.
Yes, it's you have to shake your head on that one. It's scribbled because, and it's not chaos. It's not chaos.
Nothing wrong with chaos.
Oh, no, there's not. So in order for my compass to be centered, I can't live off of one pinpoint that centers me. And that's why I say it's scribbled, because it's like you see a little kid, they draw a pictures and it's got circles, squares, lines, and everything. To them, they see what that is.
Yeah.
We just see a bunch of scribbles.
Yeah.
So my center is basically the scribbles that a child sees because they know what they drew, while everybody else doesn't know what's my center.
I'm going to try to interpret this a little bit. I think what I heard him say was that the gentleman is a weirdo. And I am too. And that's an interesting way to go about it, because if we look at the etymology of the word weird, W-Y-R-D, it means, it was a goddess, and it was the goddess of weaving, and weird means fate, but not fate in regards to a destination, but an ultimate fate.
Right.
So to be a weirdo is actually to be the most authentic way of living. You know, you're being a magical being, or you're being an authentic self when you're being weird, when you're
Weird.
not asleep or within the matrix.
Right.
You know, so you're being an individual. In other words, you have a bunch of scribbles and you find the center within that. It's a self-expression in its purest form without societal norms in hindering it.
Yeah. I wish I could have said that more eloquent like you.
Well, I think I'm trying to make sense of this. And I think that's exactly what it comes down to. All of us are just trying to make sense of it, right?
Right.
So whether we are supposed to take sides or lie in the ambiguity of contradiction, I think very much is dictated by the situation.
Yes.
I do believe that there is paradoxes, ultimate paradoxes that will probably never ever be solved by us.
Right.
And so we have to live with that. But as we move, we need to experience life in a flexible way. So choosing sides cannot make us rigid.
Right.
It's more about living the moment.
I definitely agree.
And when you're in that moment, you are whatever you are in that moment to its fullest. And you make the best of it possible. And you disregard who you were and what you could be, but you embody the best that you are at that instance.
I couldn't agree more with you.
And perhaps I'm wrong, but I do believe that lies in the philosophy of Illuminism and believing that we are perfectible.
Right. Yes.
So if we're perfectible, we aren't perfect, but we're perfectible. That means that we have the opportunity to have a perfect instance.
Right.
You know, and so our job is to increment those perfect instances.
Yes. Yes.
And as long as we're trying to do that, then we should be okay in ambiguity.
Yeah.
Because we disregard the future, we disregard the past, we are just living the moment.
Living for the moment. And you know, a lot of people, they have a problem with living in the moment, you know, because they're so caught up in life itself that they have trouble moving forward because they're stuck on the past.
Right.
So, or they're too focused on what's going to happen or what ifs, that the future is like a magnet, pulling but pushing them, you know, because you have to go forward, you know, but their future is what is holding them back.
And so you may ask what all this has to do with Masonry, and I believe that this is where Masonry takes relevance. Masonry teaches us to be able to walk upon the black and white squares,
Right.
you know, to have that contradiction and be above it.
Yes.
You know, so we also have the two columns that represent that opposite, and there is a hidden third column. Who that hidden third column would be us.
Us as individuals.
So if you have that third column being us, that would suggest something along the lines of Immanuel Kant's philosophy of a synthesis.
Right.
You have Hegel talked about a thesis and an antithesis. So you take both and then you create a new thesis, and you're constantly creating something new.
Right.
We're being creators, creating our own reality, and at the same time expressing the truest self. And I believe the reason that people are stuck in the past or not being able to fully express themselves in the moment is because they get caught up in societal norms.
Correct.
So the reason Freemasonry takes relevance at this point is because Freemasonry, in a way, teaches us to be the ultimate individual, the best we could possibly be.
Right.
And in order to do that, we need to be able to integrate the self, integrate the emotions. So, for example, we unconsciously may desire a calm life, and we unconsciously may desire stay at home type of life, but
Right.
society and social media and norms and the status quo tells us that we ought to be the socialites and this and that.
Out there, yeah.
And so perhaps you, not that this is just an example,
Right.
but perhaps you could be caught up in a contradiction, where you're trying to live by what you believe everybody expects from you to be,
Right.
and your truest self wants something else. And what's worst about this is that even when we think we're being different, even when we think we aren't being what society wants us to be, we're probably still being some form.
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one reason why a lot of people or individuals struggle in life is because of the societal standards. We want everybody to be their own individual person, but at the same time, you have the society that wants them to be a certain way, live a certain lifestyle, raise the children a certain way, school after high school, college or no college, So it's like that magnet effect. It's pushing but pulling. You have to move forward, but which standard are you going to go by? Family tradition, society traditions, or your own individuality? Individuality.
And until we are able to fully express our truest self, we're going to be caught up in unconscious contradictions, because being different or being an individual doesn't mean that you reject, oh, my family's box is this, and I choose to be that box. You're still in a box.
You're still in, yeah. It's like the when you're drawing and you're comparing facts. You draw the circles, and those circles overlap. You're in, like I said, this box, that box, and that box, and each one of them has their own piece that you play a part in within that box.
Yeah, and so this has a lot of relevance to Plato's allegory of the cave, and being caught up in there and thinking that what you see in the wall projected as a shadow is reality.
Right.
So in order to crawl out of that cave and experience the truest reality, there is some major, Carl Jung called it individuation.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, at the core of what we ought to be doing every day.
Right.
Talk to me. Tell me. What do you think?
I think that I agree with you wholeheartedly, but each day is a different day. So which box are you pulling from?
That's my point. If as long as you're looking at it, I'm pulling from this box and that box, you're still in. You're getting that shadow and this shadow. Quit pulling from boxes and look within. Right. In many ways, this is the ego death that everybody talks about. In the New Testament, Paul talked about, I must die so that he may grow. That whole concept is that renunciation or alignment of who you think you ought to be and who you are supposed to be. At the end of the day, I personally, as a speculation, believe that God experiences himself through us. And in order for God to experience himself through us, we must quit living what our ego wants us to live. So the ego's job is to push us away from what God wants us to be experiencing. And it's that battle that we've been talking about, that contradiction that doesn't allow us to live the moment. So what is the ultimate purpose of reality? Well, we know God to be a creator. We identify ourselves as uh, as created, but also as creators, which implies that there's a purpose to us. And if there's a purpose to us, that implies that that's probably the experience that God is looking to experience through us. And that purpose probably implies that that's the best quality of life we could experience if we go about it that way. So initially I asked you, is joy your compass? And the reason I asked that is because one of my compasses, I believe, is quality of life. It's all about improving your quality of life and being the best man you could be.
Yeah. It's it goes back to in kindergarten. They teach you these certain aspects. Well, let me go back some. This is something that was told to me before by this young lady. She said, when we're in the womb, someone comes and talks to us. Whatever religion, or God that it may be, someone from that aspect comes and talks to you. They teach you everything that you need to know in life while you're in the womb. When you're born and you hit that light, you instantly forget everything. So as you get older, going through life, you're trying to remember everything that was taught to you in the belly. So as we are creators, if you create something, you have to teach it. All right? Something as simple as the fez. That material, you have to mold and create that. You have to teach it. If I stretch you, you're gonna not shrink back, you're gonna keep going. Dealing with children, we teach them. So you go to school, pre-K, kindergarten, and you're teaching all of these aspects of life that are gonna help your quality of life. So we go through life continuously learning.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think the day you stop learning is the day you start dying.
Yes.
You said a very interesting word. We are to remember.
Right.
If we break that down, remember, to reintegrate, like the story of Osiris.
Oh, yes.
Who got dismembered, and Isis came and remembered.
Remember them. Yes.
That's what we ought to do. When we integrate ourselves and align or subdue or whatever your way of looking at your ego is, I don't believe killing the ego is possible or healthy, but align and subdue I'm okay with.
Right.
When you do this, you're reintegrating yourself. You're remembering who you truly ought to be or are. So the first podcast we said the trick of life is learning who we are, why we are, and what we are. That's remembering.
Yes, most definitely.
So we have the columns in the lodge, and these columns, they have their symbology. How do you think this relates to what we've been talking about?
You have to be centered and you have to be balanced. If you have a column and it's missing a chip on the bottom, it's going to tip over. So us as individuals, keeping that balance within ourselves, something happens in life from the past. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. And it hinders you from moving forward. That memory from the past is a chip on the bottom of the column. So, in aspect, we are just like the columns, and we have to self-repair or remember how to get out of that mind fog.
And so you say that the key is to be a balanced individual. And initially, we opened the podcast saying, do we find ultimate truth in choosing a side, or do we find balance in being okay with ambiguity, with contradiction? When you find yourself being a balanced individual, are you being okay choosing a side, or are you being okay with contradiction, a bonding? Is that a word? A bonding? I'm good at making up words, by the way. Yo, stick around. We'll have a dictionary.
I think it goes back to that aspect of is based on the situation, and going through life, you don't want to be different people, but at the same time, you kind of have to now with dealing with society, because the way that you handle yourself at work, at home, or at the family barbecue, they're all different people. But at the same time, that's the part of the aspect of you pulling from each box, and also those are the places that you replace when you have that chip. Those certain situations are what makes you stay aligned.
It's a tough call. I see what you're saying, and I want to push back, and I want to say, that precisely it is pulling from the boxes and not expressing your truest self. But you are correct. A lot of times it's hard to be not looked at as the weirdo,
Right.
and still be successful in business, perhaps, or
Right.
politics, which you find yourself in.
Yes, and that's I think that's one of the aspects that my children have a problem with, because I'm in the public's eye, and they want to go into town with cowboy boots, shorts, and no shirt, and I'm like, no, this is gonna come back on me.
Let the kids be weirdos.
So, and like to them, that's hey, this is what I want to wear today. This is who I am as an individual, and I'm like, but this is me. This is me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes I talk about, having that balance between being that guy in the corner singing Hare Krishna, and being the super rigid person,
Right.
very logical. And so, yeah, I there is no doubt there has to be a healthy balance that allows you to express yourself without hindering the expression of others. In this case, your kids and your expression as a politician.
Right. Yeah. It's all good at home.
Yeah. Oh boy. So we have the black and white squares that we walk upon. Black and white has us acknowledging a duality in the physical realm. However, as we progress through realities and ascend,
Mm-hmm.
duality ceases to exist. And I think there's great benefit to finding that middle way, much like Buddhism is called, that allows us to have a non-dualistic approach to life. But that is the way that we are looking at life when we see these black and white squares there. What do you believe?
I believe that with the black and white squares, in agreement with what you were saying, one aspect gives us a wide array. And out of that wide array, I think that once we get to the other square or the other side, we have to pick one of those arrays, and that's who we are throughout the time in that realm.
You pick a black square or a white square,
Right?
and that's who you are.
Yes.
What about not embodying any of the squares and being above them?
I guess that'd make you a ghost.
Perhaps, yeah, that would make you something that would be non-dualistic. It would give you a more spiritual outlook of life.
Right.
And I think that's the battle between East and West spiritualities, right?
Yeah. And just to touch something, if you actually think of how we portray ghosts, not in that scary aspect, but any ghost, no matter if you think it's a good one or a bad one, they have one goal. And that one goal may be to find that individual to help them to cross over to the other side, or that main focus could be to help an individual on their journey.
Perhaps the word ghost and angels are interchangeable energy nodes and energy fields and all of these other ways of looking at these influences, non-material influences.
That is an interesting take because both words can be used and interchanged based upon how you view them or how you may mentally take in the different aspects of what they truly are. You know, it's even if they're viewed different, they're still classified as the same thing.
There is an interesting movement happening in the scientific world where materialism has ruled science.
Mm-hmm.
And with the uprise of quantum physics, idealism is starting to be more prominent within science.
Right.
And I think that lies at the core of believing in so if you believe in idealism, you believe that at the primordial essence of all existence is consciousness. So before there was chemistry, before there was physics, there was consciousness.
Right.
If you're a materialist, you believe it started with chemistry.
Right.
So if you believe that consciousness is at the core and all else is an expression of it, then from that worldview, there very much is a possibility for all things to have an embodied or unembodied consciousness or energy or awareness. And that's how I believe these entities, call them what you may,
Right.
come in.
Yes. I would say that is where real life meets with virtual reality.
So, so what's real? I mean, I honestly really think we live in a virtual reality.
Yeah. Me personally, I believe that we live in a simulation.
Yeah.
And there's so many forces around us that, you know what? hold on. We're going to pause real quick because this all goes back to someone teaching you from what I was talking about earlier. And you know, you're born and you go through life. So as we're going through life, it's the scientific ones are trying to teach us. The virtual reality or different reality is trying to teach us. So do we jump back and forth, or do we stay on one side?
I truly believe that what we experience to be real is a simulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I truly believe that this simulation is being created or played out as a projection of who we ultimately are inside. We only experience anything within ourselves.
Right.
And so the way that we experience it is our own little simulation of reality playing its part within the big simulation. And if this is the case, this opens up a lot for us to be able to manipulate this simulation. So Carl Jung, we keep going back to this individuation that he spent his life perfecting. He talked about synchronicities.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get closer to individuation, you experience more and more synchronicities in your life.
Right.
To the point that they just become the norm. I've had a personal experience in meditation practices where I have felt a certain sense of unity that disregards the self in a very non-dualistic way. And this allowed me to view life in a completely different way. It changed who I was at my core.
Right.
And after that, synchronicities in my life have become the norm. To the point where it really seems like it's all like a cosmic joke almost. And it really seems like it's all, there's no way this could be real. It's like, this can't possibly happen like
Right.
that. So the whole idea of becoming the magician or becoming the individuation, the perfect being, is when you are able to get into that groove of the simulation, acknowledge the synchronicities, and then you're able to kind of, when you're in the rhythm, you influence the rhythm.
Right. Yeah. It's like AI. It teaches itself.
Yeah.
You know, and we teach ourselves just by getting into that rhythm of whichever aspect it is in life that we decide to take, just getting in that rhythm to make ourselves better people to ourselves, really, at the end of the day. It's, you cannot please a crowd if you are not pleased within yourself. Because even if I do get out there and I please the crowd, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because I fooled all of them because I'm not pleasing myself within.
Yeah, and to believe that you actually fooled all of them are big words. I really think that what we experience is a projection of who we are within. And so if you aren't happy with yourself and if you feel inadequate in any way, that's going to show.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You know, and as good of an act as you may be, some people will kind of read right through you.
Right.
I think one of the most perfect examples of this would be Robin Williams.
Ooh. Yes. Yeah. He fooled us all.
He pulled many,
Yeah.
but you could see the breaks and the cracks,
Right.
in a lot of the interviews, and you could see the exhaust. He was exhausting to him to do a performance and an interview, and then to
Right.
see him drained in the blue room or in the green room. I mean, you know what he's going through.
Yeah.
Perhaps I knew what he was going through because often I felt that way.
Right.
Where it was like, okay, let's turn the charisma on, yada yada yada. You get out of there, you're like, oh my God, that was exhausting.
Yeah.
Because it's you're pulling out of that box. You're
Yeah.
putting on the persona.
Yeah. And as individuals, we have to learn to keep ourselves balanced and centered in the best aspect and approach in life that's best for you. Because your happiness is what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah, we keep going back to what's important is understanding that God is experiencing himself through you, and therefore your biggest concern is having the best quality of life possible.
Right.
Give God the best experience as you can.
Yeah, he gave you life, so give that quality back to him.
Yeah, in many ways, being good to yourself is a form of gratitude to divinity.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
And in fact, I would say that when you witness those who abuse themselves is when you know they're likely not trustworthy.
Right. Right. And I think that dealing with the duality in life, we need those type of individuals because sometimes it may humble us. It make us realize, wow, someone has it worse than me.
Mm.
I need to straighten my act up, or I will be that person.
Mm-hmm. It's a funny thing. We live in a life that is constantly showing us every manifestation of the dialectic, of seeing all the opposites up there.
And many times in life, the signs are right there in front of us. And we ignore them just for the simple fact that we didn't realize that was the sign, or we think we're not ready to advance in whatever it is that we're looking to do.
Yeah, 2 points on that. So I believe that we don't recognize the signs because we are caught up in the ego and not in the flow of life, right? Where
Right.
if we start to see the synchronicities, we'll see the signs. And the second part to that is if we are to be able to take advantage of our existence, then we should be able to experience life in a way that isn't prescribed to us.
Right.
You know?
Because it's what's best for us, and you grow up, you got all these teachers in life, and everybody wants you to be someone, parents may want you to go to school, be a doctor. Your teacher tells you you have great potential, you can be the president of the United States. Then, of course, you've got these colleges and job applications, which one do you follow?
Well, the interesting part here is understanding that it isn't about, you have the kids who want to be cool. You have the adults who want all the recognition and all these titles. And it's not about that. It's about who you are. So it's not about following what the teachers tell you, but integrating what they want for you in the way that expresses who you are. So if you try to be cool, you're not going to take in what they're telling you. You think you're being different because
Right.
you're not taking in what they're telling you. but you're falling into what society wants you to do, right? So you're
Right.
still falling into a box,
Right.
you know? So ultimately, it's about being able to take from everyone and not try to be anything.
So I'm going to interrupt you real quick. So in the aspect of being a rebel, because you're going against you're going against the grain, who's to say that that's not their goal? Not that they set for themselves, but that the Creator set for them. What if that rebellious one is supposed to be a rebel their whole life, based upon how the Creator created them?
It depends on what you are calling revelry. I believe that we as Master Masons ought to be rebels to what is wrong, you know, even if everybody says it's right. You know, I believe that any good leader is by default a rebel.
Right.
You know, he's breaking society norms. But if you're a rebel just because you're a rebel, then that's not the right way to go about it.
Right.
If you're a rebel because this is what I want to do and I'm going against what I'm being told is best for me, then that you're not expressing any kind of genuine self.
Right.
You're just being silly and about to fuck up your life.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so yeah, it is about being a rebel when it comes to understanding that you're progressing, not being a rebel without a cause.
So I actually started to say rebel without a cause when I asked the question, but I was like, no, not without a cause, because I wanted to see where this was going to go.
I mean, in Mexico, when you become a Master Mason, it's this kind of, this is what you learn. You know, you're always supposed to stand up for what's right, despite of what everybody else is saying.
Right. Yeah.
That's a rebel.
Yeah.
You know, and we look at all the great leaders. They stood up against something that was breaking the norm.
Right.
So there is definitely a need for this attitude of being a rebel for there to be progression. You know, but if that progression is detrimental to yourself or society or to that rebel and his followers, then you're being a rebel without a cause. You're being a
Right.
rebel out of ego,
Oh, yes.
you know? And I think that's where we get caught up. We must understand that it's not about being right. You know, we don't always have to be right. We don't always have to know everything. You know, this isn't about the one that stands out. It's about learning and progressing. You know, if I'm right, I'm right.
Right.
But if I'm not, then take it.
Right. And
You know, so that being a rebel, a lot of times is doing the right thing. A lot of times is putting your head down.
Yes. I love how you use the word rebel in a good manner, because when we think of rebel, we think negatively, you know, but in this case, the rebel is doing negative to the ones who are against the good cause.
And that is the essence of the grotto. We turn the dark into light.
Yes, indeed. Sitara Grotto, the star grotto.
The light of the star. And from the stars, we get wisdom. So, where do we go from here?
You put me on the spot.
I put you on the spot. We've been like barely got started, and this went super deep right away.
Right away, yes.
This is good.
Yes, it's, you know, just starting any organization, you have your pinpoints that you have to hit or target for each year, regardless if you're a corporation that's has rules from someone else or your own mom and pop place. You have to have goals, and the goals that we are reaching for are above and beyond, just for the simple fact that we want to get out there and do service to the community and with the community.
And the word service is it's good to understand that service implies much more than what we already are doing, which is the clothing drives and that. But it also implies being an outlet for people to learn. It also implies being a pillar of light in society as an individual. And I believe that is what all of us are trying to do.
Yeah, yeah. Even though the Grotto goes out and have fun, at the end of the day, we are individuals. And the activities that we do together as brothers is what bonds us together and causes that unity, which once you leave, you go home, and you still have that joy or those memories, that help us to be great individuals and to help us to be able to provide and teach and help those in the community so they know what we're about.
Yeah. And pretty soon I think everybody's going to know.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that is a good note to end this on. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have something for us to talk about, please feel free to write in. And if you are a Master Mason in the El Paso area or New Mexico, I believe, looking to join the Grotto, hit up Mr. Avinash.
As always, it's a pleasure sitting here having these conversations. A lot of them people don't want to have. And just having you guys listen, teach, and go out and learn more about the things that we speak of. Just don't take our words for it. Look it up and have your own interpretation of it.
Thank you to Giancarlos behind the scene once again, Mr. JC. And thank you to everybody that stuck around.